Nobody in that luxury office expected to hear that, much less from her mouth. She wasn't a manager. She wasn't a lawyer. She didn't have an MBA from Harvard. She was the cleaning lady, hat secured with a clip, faded blue uniform, and an ID badge that rarely anyone read. She walked between glass tables and meeting rooms with the trained silence of someone who had learned to be invisible. But that day, that exact moment, invisibility shattered. It was as if the world stopped for a second. She pointed out a detail in the report about a billion-dollar merger. She said a direct, simple phrase, but one that changed everything. The millionaire, CEO of the company, known for humiliating interns and yelling at shareholders, widened his eyes. His body leaned forward, and he fell from his chair. The dry sound of the fall echoed in the room, along with the embarrassing silence. Nobody knew what to do, neither did she. But in that instant, something inside her also fell. Fear. Let's go back a little in time. 3 weeks earlier, Olivia's world was different. She would wake up at 4:30 a.m. in the suburbs of Queens, New York. She prepared coffee with milk for her 2 children, checked if their notebooks were in their backpacks, and went down the hill with her worn coat over her uniform. The subway took more than an hour to Manhattan. While men in suits passed by her without looking, Olivia knew every step of that routine. Enter through the service door of the mirrored building on Fifth Avenue, store the cleaning supplies in the back closet, and continue cleaning corridors and offices until late afternoon. She didn't complain, but not because there was no reason to. It's just that between surviving and complaining, she always chose to survive. The building where she worked was headquarters to one of the largest technology companies in the United States. A true empire built by Ethan Carrington, the finance genius, Forbes cover, faithful follower of meritocracy. According to him, those who don't rise in life simply haven't tried hard enough. Olivia heard these speeches while scrubbing the marble floor of the reception. She knew that nobody there would ever imagine what she was before putting on that uniform. And it was precisely because nobody paid attention to her that a detail went unnoticed by everyone, except her. In room 48C on Monday morning, Olivia was cleaning silently when she heard a muffled conversation. Documents were scattered on the table. Agitated voices discussed clauses, deadlines, and projections. She didn't want to listen, but she understood. It was about a billion-dollar merger, and there, among the sheets, she saw something. A number, a reference, small, almost invisible, but wrong, and very, very dangerous. She hesitated, looked around, thought, I'll stay quiet, this isn't my business. But she couldn't ignore it. Something inside her, something she had tried to hide for years, whispered, you know what you're talking about. You studied this. You recognize this error. That afternoon, Olivia did something nobody expected. She knocked on the CEO's door and entered. What she said next changed her life, and everyone's in that company. But before we know what happened in that room, we need to understand who Olivia was and what she had lost along the way. Because this isn't just a story about an avoided mistake or a surprised millionaire. It's about what happens when someone invisible is finally heard, and the world suddenly realizes that the blue uniform hid something much greater. When Olivia crossed through the revolving door of Building 721 on Fifth Avenue, nobody noticed her. She was just another uniform body in the coming and going of executives, hurried interns, and high-heeled receptionists. Even the security guards who saw her every day rarely responded to her good morning. She worked the most thankless shift, the morning one. She entered before sunrise so that the corridors and rooms would be impeccable when the owners of the world arrived. At 43, she no longer ran like before. Her hands were marked by years of cleaning products, and her eyes carried a fatigue that not even sleep could resolve. Still, she was never late, never complained, never made mistakes. Nobody knew that. Before crossing the doors of that building, Olivia left behind a small apartment, 2 teenage children and a husband absent for more than a decade. She raised Michael, 16, and Emily, 13, alone. Every cent was calculated. She bought fruit on sale at the Sunday market, hand-washed her children's uniforms, and noted extra job schedules on her phone so she wouldn't forget any. Olivia was one of those women the world labels as warrior, but never offers rest. At the company where she worked, she had learned to disappear. She knew the exact moment when the corridor would be empty to clean the trash cans without getting in the way. She avoided passing near meeting rooms, and if someone looked at her for more than 3 seconds, she would smile discreetly and look away. In practice, it was as if she were part of the furniture, useful but invisible. The building housed the headquarters of Carrington Tech, a technology and artificial intelligence giant. It occupied 23 floors and moved billions in figures. Only those who had their name on the badge and something to offer, or something to drain, entered there. Olivia, technically, was outsourced, hired by a cleaning company that provided services to the group. This meant she had no health insurance, bonuses, or even access to the main cafeteria. She had lunch in the back, in a cramped corner near the storage room. Nobody knew her last name, or her country of origin. Nobody asked questions, but Olivia observed. And a lot. There was something in her that never died, curiosity. It was as if, despite the hard life, there was still within her a small lit room, where books remained alive, where logic made sense, where she still saw herself as the woman she once was, or tried to be. During breaks, while other employees looked at their phones, she read. She picked up newspapers forgotten in rooms, listened to podcasts through headphones, watched stock quote panels on lobby televisions. She had a silent talent for numbers, a natural flair for patterns, things nobody noticed because nobody looked. One morning, while cleaning the 17th floor, reserved for executives, she heard an employee laugh. The girl was talking on the phone, distracted, and said mockingly, "Do you think someone who cleans bathrooms will understand what due diligence is?" The phrase stuck in Olivia's throat like a splinter. She swallowed hard, breathed deeply, continued cleaning, but it hurt, because what nobody there knew was that Olivia knew what due diligence was. She knew more than many who worked on that floor. Before coming to the United States, she had started an economics course at a public university in Brazil. She was one of the best students in her class. But life and poverty didn't wait for her to graduate. At 21, she lost her mother. At 22, she got pregnant. At 24, she left everything to try a better life in the United States. She arrived with 1 suitcase and a lot of courage. Her first job was as a nanny, then fast food attendant. When her children were born, she accepted the cleaning job because of the stability and stayed. Time passed. Dreams became survival, and talents were kept buried deep in her soul. At that company, the name Olivia was only mentioned when something was out of place. A paper outside the trash can, a poorly cleaned window, a misaligned chair. But she knew everyone's names there. She knew their arrival and departure times. She knew who smiled and who pretended, who said good morning and who treated the invisible as if they weren't there. And what she knew most was that the owner of all that, the CEO, Ethan Carrington, would never look at her as someone who had something to say. Little did he know that, in a few weeks, that invisible woman would change his life forever. Ethan Carrington was the type of man who didn't ask for permission. He commanded the way to be opened. At 38, he had built an empire. From teenage hacker in San Francisco to founder of one of the world's largest technology and data security companies. Magazines called him a visionary. His fans saw him as a rebel genius of capitalism. But within Carrington Tech, the most common nickname was different: the shark in a blue suit. Ethan didn't smile for no reason. He had a sharp presence, firm voice, dry steps. When he entered the office, the sound of typing decreased. Assistants exchanged glances. The elevator waited for him even when he was on the ground floor. The man was respected, feared, and behind the scenes, hated by many. For Ethan, the world was a game. Whoever had talent, discipline, and focus won. He was living proof of that. He was born into an upper-middle-class family in suburban Seattle. His father was a lawyer, his mother an engineer. From early on, he heard that money doesn't grow on trees, but opportunity grows where nobody wants to dig. At 14, he was programming games. At 17, he was accepted to Stanford, but he dropped out in his second year to found his first startup. In 5 years, he had already sold 2 companies. At 29, he created Carrington Tech, which today was worth more than $20 billion. This trajectory created in Ethan a deep conviction: nobody has an excuse to fail. For him, poverty was the result of laziness or wrong choices. Those who cleaned bathrooms did so because they didn't study. Those who earned little did so because they didn't try hard enough, period. This view, though cruel, was wrapped in charming speeches in interviews. I value those who rise from nothing, but rising requires sacrifice. Those who can't handle it don't deserve the top. And people applauded. Within the company, Ethan imposed unreachable goals and absurd deadlines. He fired those who missed deliveries and mocked ideas that didn't come with profit charts. He liked to control everything. Nothing passed without his approval. So when a merger with rival Tech began to be negotiated, he took the lead personally. It was the largest acquisition in the company's history, a billion-dollar deal that would increase their global presence and consolidate him as the king of data. He assembled an elite team, daily meetings, review of every clause. All the closest executives were involved, except, of course, the operational level employees. For Ethan, the farther from the meeting room, the less relevant the opinion. In the decisive week of the contract, the tension in the building was visible. Executives entered and exited with dark circles under their eyes, spreadsheets in hand, and triple coffees. The 17th floor, where the heart of the company was located, was a battlefield. Ethan, as always, slept little. He arrived before everyone and left last. But, unlike the others, he seemed increasingly animated. He felt in total control. Nothing could go wrong. What he didn't know and would never imagine was that the only person in that building who noticed the most serious error in the contract wore rubber gloves and cleaned the meeting room floor. He had seen her, of course. The cleaning lady, always quiet, always with eyes down. He never asked her name, never thought about her life. For him, She was part of the machinery, invisible, replaceable. And if someone had said that this woman carried more technical knowledge than many analysts, he paid six-figure salaries, Ethan would have laughed. Until the day she knocked on his door. It was a grey Wednesday. The clock marked 4:47 p.m. Ethan was reviewing a contract annex when he heard two timid knocks. He found it strange. That room had rules. Nobody entered without scheduling. "Come in," he said without lifting his eyes. The door opened slowly. Olivia entered with her badge hanging and fingers intertwined in front of her body. "Excuse me, sir. I didn't want to interrupt, but I saw a detail in the contract that maybe is wrong." Ethan, at first, didn't even understand. He looked around, expecting a manager, a lawyer, someone who was accompanying. Nothing, just her, the cleaning lady. "Excuse me, you saw what?" he asked with a half-incredulous smile. She breathed deeply. "In Annex B14, the clause about digital asset transfer from Tech, the estimated value is based on an index that was discontinued 2 months ago. If you use this as a basis, the margin will be overcharged by 12.4%. Silence. For a second, Ethan thought it was a prank. But she was serious, and she spoke with precision. She used correct terms. She had conviction. He leaned forward, placed his hands on the table, and trying to get up quickly from the chair, slipped. He fell sideways, hitting his elbow and letting out a curse word. The room fell silent. Olivia stepped back, scared. She thought about running away, but she couldn't. She stood still, waiting for the fury. But what came was different. Ethan looked at her as if seeing a ghost. How do you know this?" he asked. She hesitated, lowered her eyes. "I studied economics. Before coming here, I recognized the index." Ethan got up, massaging his arm. He looked at her as if seeing a crack in a perfect wall, something that didn't make sense, something that shouldn't be there. "Are you sure of what you're saying?" She nodded firmly. "I am, and if you want, I can show you exactly where the error is." And it was in that moment, in that glass room on the 17th floor, that Ethan Carrington's world began to turn upside down. Because, for the first time in a long time, he realized that maybe not everything was under his control, and that maybe talent didn't always wear an expensive suit. 3 days before the meeting with Ethan Carrington, Olivia was sweeping the corridors of the 17th floor when something caught her attention. One of the doors was ajar, something rare in that environment where everything was locked. Curious, she pushed it carefully, without making noise. It was the board conference room, used in the most confidential negotiations. On the table, dozens of printed sheets, numbers, charts, legal terms. A laptop at rest, open files. She was just going to clean and leave, as she always did. But one of the papers slipped to the floor. She bent down to pick it up and read, Annex B14, Digital Asset Evaluation. Just that made her heart race. It was a field she had always loved studying. It was like an ancient language that her soul still remembered. Olivia tried to step away. It wasn't her business. But her eyes fixed on a line. Calculation basis, DEX 4 index, quarterly average. She froze. That index of the DEX 4 had been discontinued months before. A new methodology was already in effect. and using it now, even unintentionally, could inflate the company's assets by millions, or worse, open the door to a fraud lawsuit if discovered. She straightened up, her heart beating fast. This wasn't just any error, this was dangerous. But what to do? During the rest of the afternoon, Olivia was taken by an overwhelming dilemma. Speaking meant crossing an invisible line. Cleaning ladies don't correct CEOs. It was a silent but powerful rule. What if they thought she had invaded the room? What if they fired her? What if they said she was making things up, or that she saw something she shouldn't have? Fear grew like a shadow, but another feeling, deeper, began to awaken, a mixture of indignation and courage. Why did she know this? Why precisely her? The answer was in the past. Years ago, in Atlanta, she was a student passionate about finance and statistics. She spent entire afternoons in the library, enchanted by charts and economic variations. Her professor said, "Olivia, you have the mind of a Wall Street analyst, but the heart of someone who will never forget where she came from." He was right. The poverty of childhood didn't prevent her from dreaming big, but her mother's death, accumulated bills, and responsibility for two younger siblings made her world collapse. She dropped out of college to support the family. She worked as a secretary, caregiver, shop clerk, and when she realized it, it was too late to return. She came to the United States with the dream of starting over. But the new beginning was harder than expected. And now, years later, that contract error reignited a part of her that was buried. There was something nobody saw, something she could change, something that made her feel alive. The next morning, she arrived earlier at the building. She took the same paper which was still in the room and discreetly noted the inconsistencies with a pencil. She read it 3 times to be sure. She did quick calculations on a scratch paper. She checked everything. And then she remained motionless, with the document in her hands, sitting in an empty chair in the break room. The doubt was immense, until she heard a group of executives passing in the corridor. If this merger goes through as it is, the company will appreciate another 18% in a week. Carrington will make it to the fortune list. That phrase was the push. She got up, took the paper, and went to the CEO's office. When Olivia entered and said what she knew, she expected to be ignored, or worse, humiliated. But that's not what happened. After the shock of the fall, Ethan Carrington didn't yell, didn't mock. He remained silent. Something in her tone, in the precision with which she described the problem, disarmed him. He took the paper from her hands, read it, frowned. "Are you telling me that this index doesn't exist anymore?" She nodded. "It was replaced. If you continue with this basis, the value of Comirtech's assets will seem larger than it really is. It could generate legal implications." Carrington bit his lower lip. He ran his hand through his hair, sat down again. "And why didn't anyone see this? Not my lawyers, not my analysts." She hesitated. "Maybe because everyone is only looking at the numbers, not at the fundamentals." He looked at her as if seeing a point outside the curve, an anomaly, an exception, but an exception impossible to ignore. Before she left, he said, "Your name is Olivia. Olivia, I want you to stay a few more minutes. I want you to show me exactly what you saw." And that's how, for the first time, the cleaning lady stayed inside the meeting room, not to clean, but to explain. The corridor seemed longer that day. Olivia walked with contained steps, her heart pounding inside her chest. Each step echoed between the marble walls, as if announcing something that shouldn't be happening. She wasn't carrying mops or cloths. This time, she brought with her a folder with handwritten notes, those she had written herself in small, calculated letters. The night before, in the dim light of her apartment kitchen in Queens, while her children slept. She was going to meet, again, the most powerful man in that building, but now, by his invitation. That morning, right at 8 a.m., Olivia was called by the receptionist. "Mr. Carrington asked for you to come up to his office now." She swallowed hard. She thought about refusing. She thought about running away. She thought about making up that she needed to finish cleaning the 12th floor. But no. Something inside her, stronger than fear, pushed her forward. She went up in the executive elevator, the same one she always avoided. When the door opened on the 17th floor, the looks were automatic. A cutting silence fell when they realized that the cleaning lady was there, without a bucket, without complete uniform, without lowering her eyes. It was the first time Olivia felt something strange in the corridors of Carrington Tech. Respect, or at least curiosity. Ethan Carrington was waiting for her. The office, always impeccable, was turned upside down. There were papers, open files, and computer screens with colorful charts. But he didn't seem irritated. On the contrary, he seemed anxious, like someone waiting for someone who could finally help him solve a problem that nobody else could. "Good morning, Olivia. Come in." She entered slowly, sat down when he indicated. "I reviewed everything you showed me yesterday, and you're right, it's a serious error. Nobody saw it, nobody." He paused. "But I saw it, because you showed me." She nodded, not knowing what to say. Her hands were sweating. "I want you to help me review the rest of the evaluation, and I want to hear your opinion on some points of Clause 19. But before that," he extended a simple contract on the table. "You're going to sign a confidentiality agreement. From now on, what we discuss here doesn't leave this room." Olivia looked at the paper. It was surreal. In 16 years of cleaning, nobody had ever handed her a contract, only orders. "I don't know if I can do this." "Why not?" he retorted. She thought for a moment. "Because if something goes wrong, they'll say it was my fault, and nobody here will defend me." Ethan remained silent. For the first time, he seemed vulnerable. "You're right." He got up, went to the cabinet, and returned with another paper. "This is a liability waiver. It says that the responsibility for any final decision is mine, not yours. You'll just assist me, informally. I assume the risks." Olivia stared at him for a few seconds. Then she took the pen and signed. For 4 hours, they sat side by side. She explained with impressive clarity how some data was inflated, how the benchmarks used were outdated, and how small phrases in the contract could hide million-dollar risks. Ethan listened, took notes, questioned, but he didn't mock. He didn't underestimate. There they weren't CEO and cleaning lady. They were two analysts, two minds, two stories in conflict, but cooperating. In the end, Ethan leaned back in his chair, tired. "You know what's craziest, Olivia? You know more about this than 3 of my executives combined." She didn't respond, but inside, she cried. Not from sadness, from recognition, but not everything would be flowers. The next morning, when the first rumors reached the director's floor, the climate changed. "Are you telling me that Carrington consulted the cleaning lady? Is this a joke? Is this how he wants to negotiate an $8 billion merger?" Executives whispered through the corridors. One or another looked at her with disdain. some with fear, others with anger. Deep down, it wasn't just about her. It was about what she represented, the breakdown of hierarchy, the threat of someone from outside being more competent than them. And in environments like that, this was unforgivable. On Friday, one of the directors, Mr. Wallace, VP of Operations, asked for an urgent meeting with Ethan. He entered huffing into the office. "You can't do this. We're already being questioned internally. You're putting our reputation at risk." Ethan calmly responded, "Reputation is built with results, and Olivia is saving us from a grotesque error. You should be thanking, not complaining." "She's a cleaning lady, Ethan." "No, she's an economist, Wallace, and she's the only one here who saw what you didn't see." Wallace left, slamming the door. But it was too late. The courage of the woman in the corridor was beginning to infect the CEO himself, and the walls of that building were beginning to tremble. The next morning, while drinking coffee with milk from a chipped mug, Olivia felt something new. For the first time in many years, she didn't feel like just a survivor. She felt seen. It wasn't just what had happened with Ethan Carrington. It was something deeper, almost invisible, like a crack opening inside, but letting in light. The question that echoed in his head, the directors, and even some employees, was the same one she, in silence, had carried for years. Who is this woman? In 1998, in a popular neighborhood in Toronto, a 16-year-old girl read economics books borrowed from the community library. She was the only one in her class who understood market functioning as if it were music. The price goes up when supply falls, but those who live in the suburbs don't see this. They only feel it, she told her teacher, with a gaze too serious for her age. Her name was Olivia Santos, daughter of a nursing assistant and a maintenance technician. Her mother said she was different, that she had eyes that see beyond the shop window. And with effort, she passed the economics course at the University of Toronto. Her father had already died. Her mother managed with shifts. Olivia worked in the morning, studied in the afternoon, and delivered food at night to help with rent. In her second year of college, her mother got sick and in a few months died. Life collapsed. Alone, with two small siblings to raise, Olivia dropped out of college. She promised herself she would return one day. She worked as a pharmacy clerk, cared for elderly people, cleaned apartments. In one of those houses, she met a naturalized Canadian Haitian, kind and educated, who worked with social programs. They soon fell in love, got married. She got pregnant with Michael, then Emily. And then came the proposal. Let's try a new life in Montreal. There are more opportunities there. Olivia hesitated, but love and the promise of stability spoke louder. They arrived in Montreal in 2006. He got a job at an immigrant integration NGO. She stayed home with the children for a few months until finances got tight. That's when she discovered incomplete diplomas, especially outside Quebec, were practically ignored. Her French was mediocre. Her English had an accent. Side jobs were tough. The marriage, once tender, became a burden. He started coming home late, then stopped coming home. One day, he disappeared completely, left only a note and overdue bills. Alone, with two small children, Olivia had to reinvent her life. Again. She got a job as a night caregiver, then at a laundromat. Finally, a cleaning company hired her to work in corporate buildings in the financial center of the United States. The salary was low, but the hours were fixed. They allowed her to accompany her children to school, and during breaks she read. She never abandoned books, never forgot concepts. She watched finance videos on YouTube, read the Globe and Mail articles slowly, underlined technical reports left in offices. She studied on trains, in cafes, in the silence of dawn. Michael, her son, noticed this early. "Mom, why do you study this if you're not going to work with it?" She replied, "Because it's who I am, son, and we can't let the world erase who we are." He admired her, not for being an economist, but for never giving up, even when everything seemed lost. At Carrington Tech, she wore the cleaning badge, but carried in her mind an economic analysis that would make many senior analysts blush. That's why, when she pointed out the error in the contract, it wasn't luck. It was competence, the one nobody saw, the one that was never called back, the one that, out of prejudice, the world preferred to ignore. Ethan Carrington, upon discovering this story, remained silent. One of his assistants brought her background, under direct orders. When he read about the unfinished graduation, the excellent grades, the scientific initiation articles she had published years before, Ethan felt something difficult to admit. Shame. This wasn't charity. It was wasted talent. And he understood, perhaps for the first time, that the system that had put him on top was the same one that pushed women like Olivia into invisibility. Even so, Olivia didn't ask for anything, not recognition, not a contract. She just wanted to work and go home. But her name was already beginning to circulate through the corridors like an uncomfortable whisper. The cleaning lady who corrected the billion-dollar contract. The woman who made the CEO fall from his chair. The immigrant nobody expected, but everyone now talks about. What nobody knew was that she hadn't yet said her most powerful phrase, and that in a meeting scheduled for the following week, she would do something that would cause shock, pride, and tears. On Monday, before the sun even touched the mirrored glass of Carrington Tech, Olivia was already on the 17th floor, not as a cleaning lady, but as the woman who had prevented the company's biggest financial disaster. Ethan Carrington, still skeptical of his own ego, decided to do something unprecedented. Invite Olivia to participate in an internal review of the merger with Tech, in secrecy, inside the war room, as an informal advisor. It was a bold bet, and risky, because for him it wasn't enough that she was right. He needed to prove that her talent wasn't luck. It was consistency. At first, Olivia was reluctant. "Mr. Carrington, I'm nobody here. If I get too involved, they'll remove me by force. I'm still the cleaning lady in the system." Ethan seriously responded, "The system is wrong, and that's why I want you to help me rewrite part of it." She didn't know whether to believe it or if it was another corporate marketing move. But something in his tone sounded different. For 3 days, she worked silently in a smaller room near the board. She analyzed reports, made handwritten notes, typed observations in protected files. She only spoke with Ethan, and with a young analyst named Aidan, who had been assigned to help her. Aidan at first doubted. She's going to review legal and financial documents, without training, without position, without resume. But the first report was enough for him to change his mind. She pointed out an error that escaped 3 outsourced auditors. This is impossible. Or genius, Ethan replied. But not everyone was willing to accept this new order. Wallace, the operations manager, began a real sabotage campaign. He started sending documents with hidden sections. He asked for systems to be updated without notice, which temporarily brought down Olivia's access. He even insinuated in a meeting with other directors, "If this woman makes a mistake, who's going to take responsibility? You, Ethan. She has no contract, no formal position. It's going to fall on all of us." Ethan responded coldly, "If someone makes a mistake here, it will be someone who didn't notice a $300 million hole in a contract, and it wasn't her." But the climate got heavy. On Wednesday afternoon, one of the oldest executives, Mr. Bradford, called Olivia aside in the corridor, an elegant man with a low voice and paternalistic tone. "Olivia, my dear, listen to some advice. You're going too far." She remained silent. "There are people here who studied at the best universities in the world. Do you really think you'll be accepted among them? Do your job. Go back to what you know. This will protect you." Olivia looked into his eyes. "Protect me from what, Mr. Bradford? From being more competent than them and bothering them, from showing that what scares them isn't who I am, but who I can be." He didn't respond. He left. But she stayed, firmer than ever. The next morning, Ethan made an internal announcement. "We are going to have an extraordinary board meeting to re-evaluate the merger with Comirtech. Some inconsistencies were found and need to be explained." Everyone expected only directors to speak. But at the end of the announcement, Ethan said, "And I want Olivia Santos to participate. She's a fundamental part of this process." The bomb was dropped. That same day, anonymous emails arrived at the board saying that Olivia was a fraud, that she had never finished college, that she was taking advantage of the CEO's kindness. Ethan investigated. He discovered that the emails came from an internal IP. Wallace, the operations manager, was confronted and summarily fired. The company understood. Ethan was willing to defend Olivia, but what about the world outside? Meanwhile, Olivia returned home as always, crowded subway, backpack on shoulders, worn shoes. But now she carried in her hands a folder with the presentation she had prepared for the board meeting. On the front, only 2 words written in pen: "Real transparency." On Friday at 10 a.m. sharp, the 20th floor meeting room was packed. Directors, lawyers, external consultants, journalists waiting outside. Olivia entered wearing a simple dress shirt, dark pants, and an improvised badge with her name handwritten. Beside her, Ethan. Many expected her to sit, stay quiet, or maybe stutter. But no. Olivia walked to the screen, connected her presentation, and began to speak. With a firm voice, she explained each point of inconsistency in the contract. She showed public data. She cross-referenced information. She pointed out where the merger only favored the rival company. This contract, if signed as it is, would put Carrington Tech at legal, financial, and reputational risk. It's not a matter of opinion. It's mathematics. For 20 minutes she spoke, without stumbling, without fear. At the end, a sepulchral silence took over the room. And then the improbable happened. Applause. Ethan stood up. He looked at everyone and said, "This is Olivia Smith, and today she saved us from a hundreds of millions error, not by chance, but by merit." On that grey Friday morning, what happened inside Carrington Tech didn't stay there. The story escaped through the walls like a whisper, crossed the corridors of power, and descended through the elevators directly to the world. The video of the extraordinary meeting, which had been recorded for internal purposes, leaked hours later. A 2-minute and 40-second clip showed Olivia standing in front of a digital board, pointing out data with a conviction that many executives there had never seen, even among MBAs from McGill or Oxford. It's not a matter of status, it's a matter of logic and responsibility to the truth. This was the phrase that exploded on social media. The video title, "Cleaning Lady Corrects Billion-Dollar Contract and Silences Technology Board in the United States." In less than 12 hours, it went from 1 million views on YouTube. On Twitter, hashtags like Olivia Smith, Real Meritocracy, and Listen to the Invisible were among the country's trending topics. Morning TV shows aired clips with dramatic captions. "Who is this woman?" was the question of the moment. Reporters camped in front of the Carrington Tech building. Economics columnists praised her precision. Social activists spoke of silent revolution. Even the innovation minister commented, saying, "It's time to review what we understand as talent." Olivia, however, remained silent. She refused interviews, didn't respond to messages. The following Monday, she arrived at the building through the usual entrance. With the uniform, she washed herself and went up to the 17th floor as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. When she entered the company, she noticed the looks. Some were of admiration, others of embarrassment. The receptionist smiled and said, "There's coffee waiting in Mr. Carrington's office. He wants to see you." She went up. Upon entering, Ethan was standing, holding an envelope. "Olivia, I think you know what I'm about to do. But first, I want to thank you." She remained silent. "The company is cancelling the merger with Comir Tech, and yes, your presentation was decisive. The shareholders voted against it, and they're praising your clarity. You not only saved our reputation, you saved our jobs." He extended the envelope. "This is a proposal, fixed position, your own office, analysis team, everything in your name. The job is yours if you want it." She looked at the envelope for a few seconds. Then she lowered her eyes. "What if I don't want it?" He raised his eyebrows. "Then you'd surprise me for the 1,000th time." She smiled, a light smile, but loaded with world. "Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. I just hope you understand. I'm not offering you a favor. I'm correcting an injustice." She thanked him, but the envelope remained closed in her hands. Meanwhile, outside, the media continued in frenzy. LinkedIn profiles tried to guess her trajectory. Diversity specialists pointed out how Olivia's case exposed one of the corporate world's greatest hypocrisies, the idea that only those with diplomas hanging on walls and Anglo surnames have value. One of the most shared articles was by columnist Ava Thompson from the Globe and Mail. "Olivia Smith is the exception that proves the cruel rule. She was only heard because a powerful man fell from his chair." Literally. How many other Olivias are today cleaning offices with shelved ideas, suffocated dreams, and ignored talents? But not everything was roses. The following week, the company received a lawsuit from a group of former directors alleging that Olivia violated confidentiality clauses. The pressure increased. Carrington gathered the legal team and said, "If anyone here dares to harm Olivia, I'll fire them immediately. She's a vital part of the company, period." Even so, Olivia continued refusing interviews. She stayed with her children, went to the local library, studied alone. She didn't want fame, she wanted truth and time to decide. One day, Michael, her son, came home with a newspaper clipping. He had pasted it on cardboard, her photo, standing in the meeting room. "The teacher asked us to present a hero we know. I chose you," she cried, silently, as always. But in that cry, there was relief. On Friday of that same week, Olivia returned to the company. She went up to Ethan's office, sat in front of him and said, "I read the contract." He looked up. "And I want to accept. But with one condition." "Any condition. I want this position not to be just mine. I want the company to create a program for invisible talents. People with potential, but without opportunity. I want the company to look at those nobody looks at." Ethan breathed deeply. "You want to create a new recruitment process?" She replied, "No, I want to create a new culture." He smiled. "Done." The following week, the Bright Roots program was officially launched, aimed at identifying and training marginalized talents, immigrants, single mothers, informal workers with technical background. The name was her choice. In the first class, 12 people. Among them, a Syrian woman who was a civil engineer in Damascus, a former Nigerian mechanic with data expertise, and a young indigenous person who never had a chance to show his talent with statistics. Olivia became strategic analysis manager. Her badge now carried a title, but she still carried the same eyes as always, those that saw what nobody saw, and that would never again be ignored. Outside, New York City continued its hurried pace. Trolleys passing, full cafes, people talking on phones with coffee cups in hand. But on the 21st floor of Carrington Tech, the routine was no longer the same. Where before there were only technical jargon and predictable meetings, now there was also something rare in the corporate world, attentive silence when Olivia Smith spoke. 3 months had passed since the historic meeting. Olivia now occupied a strategic position, not because of appearance, networking, or a pedigree resume, but because of clarity, logic, and a competence that nobody could ignore anymore. On her first day in the new role, she arrived early. As always. On the desk, a new laptop. Beside it, a note signed by Ethan. "You got here with more obstacles than I ever faced. May this place finally allow you to run without chains." She smiled, breathed deeply, and began. Her first project wasn't technical, it was human. Olivia did something that caught the entire team by surprise. She asked to talk one by one with the outsourced employees of the building. Doormen, cleaning, security, kitchen. She sat with each one, asked about routines, problems, what they saw behind the scenes, and she noted everything. They see what managers ignore, and they know the operations holds better than any consultancy, she explained to the executive committee. Some wrinkled their noses. Others tried to disguise their discomfort. But in 2 months, the improvements she proposed based on these conversations increased the building's efficiency by 23%. Without miraculous spreadsheets, just listening to those who were never heard. On the other side of the city, Michael, her son, had just been accepted to a technical programming school. "I want to work with data like you, Mom," he said proudly. Emily, the youngest daughter, created a school presentation called Women Who Inspire and put her mother at the top of the list, above Marie Curie. Olivia, despite her recent fame, remained discreet. She took the subway, shopped at the neighborhood market, helped neighbors. But now she was approached by strangers. You're the woman from the video, right? My sister saw you on LinkedIn. You changed the way she thinks. My mother cries every time she watches that clip of your speech. However, not everything was applause. In an external meeting with investors, one of the representatives, a grey-haired man with a condescending voice said, "It's impressive what you did. But now that you're inside the system, you'll understand how it really works, won't you?" Olivia just replied, "The difference is that I know the system from outside and inside, and I know where it fails with people like me." The room fell silent. The phrase became a viral post, but for her it was just another truth spoken aloud. The transformation that Olivia represented was deeper than resume. It was a change of axis, a narrative break, from invisible to indispensable. At Carrington Tech, selection processes began to accept life experiences as differentials. Resumes were rewritten with fewer elitist filters, and even reports began to include data on internal diversity at her suggestion. The company, which before prided itself on technological innovation, now also became a symbol of human innovation. But Olivia knew one change wasn't enough. It needed to be sustained. So every month, she still visited the room where she started. She talked with cleaning ladies, helped adjust work schedules, listened to complaints. "You're a boss now," they told her. She replied, "No, I'm just in a different chair, but I'm still people like you." One day, in the cafeteria, a young intern approached. "You know what inspires me most about your story? It's not the billion-dollar contract, not the fame. It's that you never moved away from who you were." She smiled. "You know why? Because the whole world can change around you. But if you forget who you are, you lose yourself." And so, in the heart of one of Canada's largest companies, the woman who once cleaned the corridors now helped design their future, not by miracle, not by luck, but by merit, by resistance, and by never letting die what she carried in silence, the certainty that she deserved more, even when nobody said it out loud. A few months after the historic turnaround, Olivia Smith was sitting on a bench in a New York park, watching the sunset between the buildings. Beside her, Michael and Emily laughed while sharing a bag of chips. The cold wind blew lightly, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to breathe, without hurry, without fear, without invisibility. At Carrington Tech, the impact of what Olivia had done wasn't limited to the saved contract or the new position. Other companies began to review their recruitment processes. A public university in Ontario invited her to give a lecture on meritocracy and hidden inequality. In the packed auditorium, she went up to the stage with trembling hands. She looked at the audience and said, "What brought me here wasn't a badge, it was persistence." And a phrase I repeated to myself every day: "What I know has value, even if nobody sees it now." Applause, tears, silence full of respect. Olivia refused various invitations to become an influencer, write autobiographies, or make advertising partnerships. "I don't want to be a product. I want to be a bridge." And that's what she became. In 2024, a new professional development center was inaugurated in Scarborough, the neighborhood where Olivia lived. Its name, Olivia Smith Development Center. Talent beyond sight. There, hundreds of immigrants, single mothers, refugees, and marginalized young people study for free to work in the technology, data, finance, and management sectors. Many of them never had access to a university, but now they had access to something even more powerful, the chance to be seen. Ethan Carrington, in an internal speech, said, "Olivia isn't an exception. She's the rule that the system hid for decades. If we want to lead the future, we need to stop looking only at the top of the resume and start listening to those we forgot along the way." Olivia, today, still works at Carrington Tech, but whenever they ask what her greatest achievement was, she replies, "Continuing to be a mother, continuing to be fair, continuing to be me." Because in the end, the world can change. But the real victory is not losing yourself. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of this entire story. Never underestimate those who are silent. Never ignore those who clean the floor you walk on. And never doubt the value of those who, even invisible, carry within themselves an entire universe of possibilities. Because sometimes the most powerful phrase in the room comes from those nobody expected to hear.